My name is Brian Hester, and I'm going to share with you how content literacy and disciplinary literacy is utilized in my high school setting, being a beginning Art 1 visual arts class teacher. I want to share with you why it's so vital and how I use it literally every single project that I cover throughout the year. First and foremost, my students are able to increase their aptitude and become stronger through not only the written and verbal expression, but it's imperative that they ingest the building blocks and that information specifically for fluency, because in the visual arts, every single component that is covered has a next level and it's tiered. So content literacy, simply put, are ways that we learn and the tools that we gain within that content. Disciplinary literacy has to do with applying that content, applying that content-based material to elevate how it's used and ultimately where it goes. It's important to mention that there is an agreement, an accord within the visual arts and the work that's produced, that it utilizes content literacy to bolster disciplinary literacy as an interchange. And that's my interpretation as an interchange, meaning that it feeds on itself in an ever-evolving cycle. And I want to speak directly to how students initiate, ingest, finalize, and also evaluate a piece of artwork that they create in my class. And I've literally used this formula for 30 years, not only on the production end, but also for the critical methodology on how the artwork is ultimately juried aesthetically. Example, I will post a lesson, the students will view it, read the material, and then we go through a healthy Q&A just to kind of get the juices flowing. I display visuals for representation and then follow all of that with handouts. The imagery of previous projects is usually infused in there, as well as just visuals that I have up on the wall of how other people or even previous students might have handled a similar prompt. This always actually entices more Q&A with structure, direction, and also helps with the parameters that the class ultimately is working within. Then basically you get the tennis match that happens, the back and forth between me and the students, the Q&A still elevated, the students dig in for their research and the concepts start bubbling. They take notes on how they'll build their infrastructure, their compositions, all of their planning on how they want to execute their ideas and concepts. Then I do demonstrations on how to work with certain mediums, and then I use those mediums as an example on how they can be applied. Can I put this here? Can I put this here? What if I were to use this line technique here? What if I were to end up? It's endless, the applications that it has. Students then can emulate the demos that I do by mimicking and practicing what they've witnessed for fluency, and ultimately apply it into their own work. And once they gain their footing, I can cut them loose and then they can execute their planned work. This is actually a cool parallel as far as content literacy to disciplinary literacy. And because I just spoke about products, the products also has a double, and that has to do with the evaluative end phase, i.e. the critical review phase. Everything kind of culminates within that written and also discussed format, and which is technically how I teach the anatomy of the critical method. For example, description, analysis, interpretation, judgment. Those are formal. That's a formal critical review. Description has to do with the elements of art: line, shape, color, texture, value, space. Analysis has to do with basically the principles of design: unity, balance, rhythm, emphasis, movement. Interpretation has to do with mood and ultimately maybe similes and metaphors that can be used to interpret. And then ultimately that kind of falls into judgment phase, where you're talking about the originality of the work, its design. Does the work actually does the piece work? What influences were involved in the creation of it. So all of that is the wrapping up phase. And this is where technically interpretive and expressive modes makes that jump to those new degrees of disciplinary literacy. For example, after I covered a lesson in watercolor with the Q&A, and the kids hear my delivery and they watch my demos, and maybe even they watch a video along with my handouts that I give them, they can take a previous unit lesson in pen and ink and then apply that previous lesson of pen and ink to the watercolor, which is really, really cool, because that actually can help them sharpen and enhance certain details. So they've had an experience, and now they take that previous experience, then boom, it goes to the next level. And that's really, really cool how that happens, where you start to see them take those tangibles and put them together. As the students' literacy increases just simply by concept and understanding their subject matter, the execution of the medium, then they can start applying that new learned content to other newly introduced processes, thus reinforcing a solid foundation of learned material. Basically, the light bulb goes off, and so, if I use this technique with this, then what happens? Question mark. What if I do this? Question mark. Or I wonder what this will do if I combine this with this. Another question. Boom, light bulb goes off. So the discovery factor then ends up leading knowledge to be obtained, and then boom, 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 pursuance of new innovative applications. It's killer. That new material can be furthered through those elevated critiques at the end of each project by reviewing work over and over and over and over again. The dialogue grows, vocabulary increases, and the context of which it's used changes drastically simply based upon validity. So, an example, a student applies pen and ink techniques to a watercolor piece like I just talked about, and then they can start articulating what they went through personally as it's explained through their own written word. They've been there before, they can understand what they're evaluating, thus being able to articulate a solid critical review, and this gives credence to the adjudication process. In essence, as they dissect the work, they understand what was going on in the artwork's presentation, as well as ultimately knowing how it's represented. This congruence is key for content to translate as acquired knowledge, ultimately to heighten those new levels of discipline. Wanted to wrap up by saying specifically this course has helped me refine my sequencing, no doubt. Not only in how I deliver the material, but the methodologies, key methodologies, and how it can be utilized as, like I said before, in my words, interchangeable. I always urge my students to kind of recreate the wheel in hopes of letting them find their own personal voice. And by developing the necessary foundation they need to grow, advocating these literacy techniques ensures ways to kind of tap into other arenas of answering internal and posed problems that those kids encounter every single day, as well as visually every single day. So students can see through multiple lenses eventually, and then they ultimately don't approach things as things just being linear, but as multidimensional. And this basically revolves around becoming a critical and creative thinker. So, got a lot out of it. It's good. Thanks. Again, Brian Hester, signing off.